So hello, I'm really glad to have you here this afternoon. My name is Jason. I'm working for Zama as ecosystem lead, and I have two guests today, and I'll let you guys present yourself.
My turn?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, so my name is Luc Falampin. I'm the CEO at Tokeny, so I guess we'll have time to talk about it.
And Ghazi from Zama. I'm heading corporate development, and I work on partnerships, with large banks, institutions, but also blockchains.
So the goal of the talk today is to talk about tokenization. It's a big narrative of this cycle. It's even the end game, I guess, to have all of finance running on super great crypto rails. So maybe first we could start by explaining what Tokeny is, if some people don't know this, and we'll go after for explaining maybe an overview of what Zama is doing in this space.
All right, so Tokeny, we are a leading on-chain finance solution, basically. So we help financial institutions to tokenize assets, to issue, to manage, to distribute these assets in a compliant way. We do this since 2017, so we have built a lot of tools to do it properly, to bring really compliance and control on-chain, and to bring some protection for token holders, investors, because if you want to use a blockchain, you need to make sure you can control what you do on these blockchains.
I like to make things very concrete. Can you just give us one example of solutions of the real world using Tokeny today as we speak?
Yeah, so we are a white label platform, so we always have to be careful with our clients, but we work with Citibank, with HSBC, with Invesco, with large fund administrators, asset managers, banks, fund administrators, some exchanges.
And it's real, it's right now, it's not in 10 years?
It is happening. We have clients since 2018, so it is possible to tokenize assets. Then you do it more or less on chain, with more or less scalability, with more or less compliance, etc. But you can tokenize assets. With our tools, you can literally enforce securities regulations on chain, even on public blockchains.
Okay, thank you. And Razi, maybe give us a quick explanation of what Zama is doing and its link with the tokenization world.
So Zama is an encryption company. We invented FHE. FHE is all about compliant confidentiality for the blockchain. So it's about encrypting my balance, my transaction value, so that only I and potentially the regulators or the compliance officers can see what I'm doing. When you take it on a public blockchain, what it means is that a validator can see the inputs encrypted, so they don't know what is inside. They can execute a smart contract on these inputs and get an encrypted output without having any idea what they've done. But they can still reach consensus because they've all done the same operations and all reached the same outputs. And so the confidentiality, we believe, is an important part of public blockchains, and this is what we're going to discuss today.
Wait, I just don't understand. I thought public blockchain was about transparency and opening the financial system, and you're telling me that you're encrypted stuff and hiding stuff? Did I hear correctly?
We're not hiding. We're not hiding. Transparency is still there because anyone can do the calculations. Anyone can confirm the coherent state of the blockchain, but without knowing what is there. And it's important to differentiate anonymization, for example, from confidentiality. It's all about compliance in our case.
All right, thank you. Now, I know that in the world, if we take all the financial assets, it's dozens of trillions. And I've recently checked rwa.xyz, which is a great dashboard for tokenization. And I've only seen that there are like a few billions of assets if we don't take stablecoins. If you take stablecoins, it's more like 200 billions. But if we remove stablecoins, only a few billions of financial assets are on chain today. That's not even 1%. This space has been existing for like 8 years. Why is that so? Why it's not more than 1% today, maybe Luc?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's okay. Sorry. So for sure, privacy is still something to crack. So that's one of the answers. Because actually, you have billions of tokenized assets on private chains. And we barely know about it because it's used internally from some large companies. So it is happening, but it's not necessarily what we see on a day-to-day basis. And on rwa.xyz, for example, you only have the assets where you have on-chain payments. most of our clients, they accept payments off-chain. They tokenize their asset on-chain, but the subscriptions, redemptions, investments are actually paid in fiat. So on-chain, you cannot really see the value of these assets yet. You cannot really see all of the volumes, etc., because a lot of big part of the operations are still off-chain.
So why are they off-chain today?
Because most large investors and financial institutions are not really comfortable to deal with stablecoins. Most stablecoins, you need to secure them properly. Otherwise, if you lose your wallet, you lose your money. The regulatory status of stablecoin is complicated. Even more now in Europe with MiCA, actually. So stablecoins are still to come. And actually, with our tools, we do more and more cash coins in different forms because of this.
Okay, so this raises an important question. You mentioned public blockchain that I can see on dashboard like rwa.com or lots of different dashboards. That's the nature of it. It's transparent, so everybody can build dashboard. Lots of this value tokenized is on private blockchain. So what is today the main difference between the two? Because I've been in this space for like 7 years, and there was a big narrative of blockchain, not Bitcoin, not crypto. Recently, BlackRock launched a BUIDL token on Ethereum mainnet. What has changed recently, and what are the main trade-offs between private blockchain and public blockchain today?
So when we started in 2017, it was hard to justify that public blockchains were suitable. It was super long, every transaction, it was expensive, it was not reliable. I think now we progressed a lot in terms of public blockchain infrastructure. So this is helping. So step by step, we are moving from a siloed finance to a shared IT infrastructure, which is a full proposition of the value proposition of blockchain. Now we see all of these private blockchains trying to get interconnected. The key buzzword in our space is interoperability. It means everything and nothing, but it's quite important. Is people who are trying to keep some operations private, but collaborate with other financial institutions and other networks and exchanges, etc. So step by step, we are seeing this connection points more and more.
Okay, but what is your view on the same question for Razi? If I want to tokenize an asset, should I go on a public blockchain or a private blockchain today? And
I'll take this one. Yeah, so, sure. I think why tokenization is maybe the first question, and it's not that the technology is superior. Banks could have come up with other ways of interacting with each other. So the interoperability that Luc has talked about. It happens that tokens existed as a standard thanks to Defi. And so they thought, why do we invent another protocol? We already have one, let's operate on it. And this is how you can move assets from one bank to the other, you can lend, etc. The problem is if you go on a private blockchain, you lose all the benefits of that interoperability because now I need to trust bank A that they actually have the assets and that they're going to move them to bank B. Whereas on a public blockchain, that trust is inherently there because it's a public blockchain. Everything is transparent and everything happens despite of a change of mind of one bank, one sender, one receiver. So public blockchain is, in my opinion, the only way for tokenization to get hold. Private blockchains were a stopgap while waiting for this to happen.
And so can you just briefly explain, without going into details, what Zama exactly is doing with public blockchain? How do you providing a confidentiality solution in this way?
So if you think about a token as me sending you equity and you sending me money against that equity, on a public blockchain, everyone will see the transaction. So they know that I sold you my shares for $1,000. Everyone will see how much money I own and how much shares I own, which is problematic. I mean, it's not problematic for everyone, but it's problematic for a lot of people. Add to it that there is an unease from distribution layers, so for investment managers, to disclose all the information they have about their clients. So if they have a big client with $100 million worth of shares, they don't want that information to be available to everyone to see. And so they want to shield that information. This is what Zama is about. the balance stays encrypted, the transaction value stays encrypted. And to jump on Luc's example, even the stablecoins could be encrypted so that no one knows how much money was spent to buy the equity. No one knows how much dividends were distributed to the equity holder.
Okay, so compliance and confidentiality is a prerequisite. Now, if we talk about assets. So today you have a few dollars tokenized. We have a few T-bills, money market funds tokenized, just getting started. You have a few also gold and precious metals. MiCA just passed in France, in Europe, sorry. Other regulations are coming. Which assets are coming massively on chain after what we have today? What will come?
Any type of securities. Now it's clear that as long as you can enforce securities laws on chain, you can tokenize securities. We see currently a lot of public instruments. So everything that is listed on large exchanges or money market funds, treasury bills, etc. Because you can distribute this to the retail. But it's not that interesting. You can already go to Robinhood and buy this type of instrument, actually. So you can do some efficiency gains, operational efficiency gains, but not that much. So the future is mostly alternative funds or all of these assets that are hard to find, hard to invest in, and where you usually have no liquidity. If you invest in a real estate fund, usually it's for 5, 7, 10 years. You're blocked in that fund. Why? Because the investment manager needs the money to buy buildings and to exploit them and to resell them. So they cannot manage liquidity for investors. So by default, it closes the door to many investors. All of the investors who cannot wait for 10 years. So if we tokenize this, we can bring much more liquidity and utilities to these tokens, to these assets. For example, for collateralization, etc. So I think alternative funds and all of these assets, private equities, kind of things will come step by step.
One of the original goals of the blockchain was accessibility. Alternative funds and the other asset that you mentioned are not really for the retail investor. Am I correct?
It depends. You have some rules to respect, but you can invest. So yes, it's not necessarily for everybody all the time, but you can define the proper legal setup in order to distribute to retail or to other class of investors, not only the large institutionals, but family offices, high net worth individuals, etc. So it's already going towards democratization, even if it's not perfect yet, but it's going to help already. And then you have all of the other assets, like like loans, for example. You can invest in loans. They're not securities, depends, but and you can tokenize loans.
You mean me as an individual, I can do that, or any company that wants to diversify?
We can tokenize anything you want, as long as you can control these tokens. If you just issue an ERC20 token and it goes everywhere without your control, you will very quickly fall into shady part of the law. But if you create an asset with the right legal documentation and the right control points and compliance points, you can tokenize everything you want. Then it's not a technology problem, it's a legal problem. And yes, today if you're rich, it's easier to invest than if you're poor. Yes.
Another topic I'd like to talk about is there is a fundamental trade-off between confidentiality and transparency regarding illegal activities. And so Razi just explained that with Zama's technology we are adding confidentiality. Confidentiality on these assets. How do we keep confidentiality, keep public blockchain with self-owned assets without custodial, while being compliant with the laws?
Yeah, I think so. Confidentiality exists in this world today. If you have a bank account, you can put money there. If you are a broker account, you can buy shares. No one knows but that bank or that broker that you have these shares, these assets. And if the police wants to investigate you, obviously the bank will collaborate. So we're trying to mimic that in the digital asset world, meaning no one needs to know how much I have, but if I'm under investigation, obviously the bank, the investment manager, will have to disclose certain information under certain conditions, obviously. And so that's what we mean by compliance confidentiality. On the smart contract, people see who can decrypt what. And so the compliance officer of the bank can potentially decrypt certain information about the client of the bank. And every time the compliance officer uses that right, it goes through an audit trail so that we know who has looked at what. In most cases, it's going to be just me checking my balance, making sure that the transactions went through. But in certain cases, it has to be someone who needs to check that I'm not doing something wrong.
Okay, I'm just trying to translate here. So you mean that I can go on Etherscan, go on the tokenized assets page, see the code, and see clearly that there is a line saying the regulator has access to all the unencrypted value.
Totally. I mean, most likely it's not going to be the regulator, but the compliance officer of that I'm working with. But yes, you will see his wallet address, or you will see the conditions that a wallet needs to fulfill in order to require the decryption of certain information. It could be my balance, it could be transaction values, it could be a function of all these values.
Maybe look at, have you had a recent example of a regulator asking you about disclosure of information recently on an asset? How does it happen in real life?
So on our side, no, because we are just a tech provider. But our clients, yes, before they issue a security and tokenize the securities, they need to create some legal documentation, depending on the type of assets, to declare it to their regulator. They have to follow rules to distribute these assets, etc. So yes, they are controlled as some are issuing like regulated funds. They are controlled as regulated funds, and indeed, you need to provide all of the proofs that you have KYC check everybody, that these transactions were okay, etc.
Okay. Another aspect I'd like to tackle is, the great thing about DeFi and Ethereum in the early days is that very, very quick we had standardization in the form of ERC. So first came ERC20, which was an amazing interface, and people could build Lego and building blocks on top of ERC20. You had Compound, you had Aave, you have an explosion of DeFi protocol that could smoothly integrate in Ethereum. And today we have lots of different asset class coming on chain. I'm a little bit afraid that there will be not real standardization. I haven't seen a lot of things. I've seen lots of different standards. What's your view on this standardization issue? Because that's the key.
Yeah, and we didn't want to invent a new standard. Years ago, we were a small company. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but indeed, there was no standard for what we were trying to do. ERC20 was too simplistic for what we want to do because we need compliance rules, we need controls, etc. So over the years, we developed a lot of different smart contracts. And a year ago, we decided to open source all of this. So now it's a standard because it's an ERC 3643, so it's a real standard from the Ethereum community. We open source this. We created a non-profit association with around 70 members. Zama just joined us. Thanks for that, guys. So in this association, we have large law firms, large financial institutions, 20 tokenization platforms, Web3 players, and all together we are trying to build the future of this industry. So there is a standard that you can use. It's free. It's a set of smart contracts where you basically get a permission tokens, so an ERC20 on steroid, where you can define your compliance rules, properly identify the stakeholders, so your investors, your agents, the owner of the smart contracts, etc., in order to apply securities laws. So all of this exists already. Then we need, of course, always more and more adoption. It will not be the only standard, and it's okay. Why? Because smart contracts are composable. ERC 3643 is leveraging ERC20 and a dozen of others ERC, actually, and you can build on top of it. You can add other smart contracts to add any other things. It's compatible with Uniswap and most DeFi protocol, for example, natively.
And how does it integrate with identity protocol? Because in the past 2 years, I've talked with, 50 different identity solutions, protocol. There is so much innovation here. Is your standard opinionated regarding identity? How does it integrate?
So since day one, we realized that identifying the stakeholders is key if you want to manage permissions on chain. So we have built a DID solution, which is open source as well. It's fully part of the protocol. But you can actually connect any type of KYC solution or any type of other IDs to this one. It's just an on-chain box where you add proofs. So it's compatible with any identity system, but it's really key to manage these identities and these claims to make sure that your token holders are legit and authorized to get tokens.
Thank you. And also regarding identity, a question more for Gazi here. I've heard that with FHE, for the first time, you can put your identity information on chain. Like your age, your nationality, your name, etc., in an encrypted way. Maybe can you elaborate a little bit on this exactly? Isn't it dangerous?
Dangerous, no, because it's encrypted. So ultimately, only you will be able to see that information. It's a question of on-chain versus off-chain. So it's often, how much information do you want to put on-chain? How much do you want to prove that you've done the compliance that you're supposed to do on-chain versus off-chain. Ultimately, solutions can coexist. So you could put all the information and compute, whether a person or not can do the transaction. You can put a flag on-chain that, clarifies whether a person is allowed to trade certain assets under certain jurisdiction, or you can put it off-chain. And I think, one of the reasons why we joined, the ERC, 3643 association is also to have that discussion to see what do actually investors, investment managers, funds want to see on chain to get confidence that they're not going to do a KYC for each and every asset and each and every transaction, and how much of it they are not comfortable putting on chain. The beauty of FHE is that it allows both. So it's a lot or little, and this is what we're going to try to find the right, the right approach for the right expectations of the actors of the tokenization.
Thank you. In this space, we are all dependent on one another. I have an open question for you two. What are you the most excited about in the future delivery from other protocol? What are you expecting? What do you think will improve your own protocol that is not in your hands today?
I can start, and I'm sorry, it will look a bit fake, but for me, privacy is the last thing we didn't crack. We need privacy because one of the key value proposition of blockchain is on-chain settlement. You cannot do on-chain settlement if the cash leg is not encrypted or a bit hidden. Otherwise, the price of every asset. So on public markets, it's fine, but in the alternative world, it doesn't work. Let's take Tokeny. If tomorrow you have an investor selling some shares at half of the value of the company, all of the other investors will freak out to say, what happened? Where is there a problem? Am I aware of everything, etc.? So if we want on-chain settlement and DVP, we need to do something with the cash leg. Of course, we want to use cash on-chain, but we also need to hide some information. Seeing the assets moving is fine. Seeing exactly the price of these assets when they move, it's something totally different for asset managers.
Thank you. Gazi?
Yeah, I would say technology can solve most of the problems today. If regulators were clarifying more certain things, that would definitely help with adoption. I think adoption is key, not just in terms of, DeFi, enthusiasts, but at the level of the investment managers, they have to start preaching, the blockchain to their clients so that they enable them to do secondary trading, collateralized lending, etc., in such an easy way. So it's a win-win, but we haven't crossed that bridge yet.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from you guys in the public? Yeah?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if anyone can hear me like this. Thank you for the panel. It's very thought-provoking, so that's good. So I have a couple of questions. At first, we discussed a little bit of on-chain versus off-chain. And what's usually a driver for that is a bit what type of data you want to expose publicly or... Oh, there. Ah, okay. I can sit down, it's fine. So which data you want to expose, and also linked to that is GDPR type of information. So my first question would be, how would you then combine off and on-chain data into that encryption that you have? And secondly, how do you handle GDPR information linked to that it is then encrypted, but encryption is not sufficient for GDPR purposes?
So we have discussions with GDPR, so this is what I was alluding to with regulation. The last time GDPR had an opinion about encryption was 5 years ago. Threshold decryption did not exist back then. So, the assumption that GDPR makes is that there is an encrypted data and there is a private key. And therefore, personal data, even if it's encrypted, is still personal. If you break the key across 10, 20 participants who all commit to fulfill certain obligations in terms of access control, the data is no longer just encrypted, it's encrypted within a protocol of privacy. And so we were just discussing this with Luke. GDPR talks, for example, about the right of erasure, the right to forget data. It's a big problem in public blockchains. If you remove, something, then the whole idea of a transparency collapses. And so you can do pseudonymization, that's fine. But you could also say all the nodes, all the decryption nodes can agree that they will stop decrypting the data, the personal data of a person, if that person has asked not to be decryptable. And so you just add a flag, and within the decryption protocol, they will see that the access control has been removed, and therefore that the data is no longer accessible. So for off-chain, on-chain, totally agree with you. GDPR needs to take into account these new protocols, these new encryption schemes. And we're quite hopeful that we're going to get there soon. We're engaged with our French counterparts, but if anyone has also other European counterparts, we're happy to talk to them as well.
Hey, thanks for the talk. Very insightful, thanks. Last time I looked into full homomorphic encryption, but maybe about 18 months ago, it was still slow and expensive for certain use cases. Is that still a challenge? And can you maybe just quickly summarize the current state of the tech?
So slow is a matter of slower versus slow, right? So slow, today we can do 5 transactions per second on a CPU, on a single CPU, and we can, in most cases, parallelize the throughput. So 5 TPS, when you hear about people talking about 10,000, 100,000 TPS may sound little, but when you're private equity, someone like BlackRock does, 10,000 transactions per day? It's definitely manageable, and definitely manageable within, small time frames. We looked at stablecoins as a simulation. So VUST, it goes, USDT, sorry, it goes to 150 TPS, but in most cases it has an average of 40. You throw 10 CPUs, problem solved. So 10 CPUs, you can deduct the cost of having that additional layer. It's not much. So yes, the slowness is still there. We've improved the speed dramatically, quarter on quarter. We are now releasing a GPU version that hopefully will get us to 20 TPS. It's not going to be 10,000 anytime soon, at least not with an ASIC.
Hardware as well. You mentioned hardware.
Hardware, so that's what I meant by ASIC. So ASIC is specialized chips that would accelerate, the computations. We do have a hardware team focused on FPGAs for the moment, so it's programmable hardware. And they're getting very decent performance. It's just a question of translating that into faster speed. But to be honest, if you can do USDT with 5 CPUs, 10 CPUs, we may not need that ASIC to get to the right speed for most use cases. Not retail use cases. We're not after retail use cases.
Also today, with the caveat that it's USDT volume today.
True, true. But it's still quite large volumes. That's all I'm trying to say.
One last question.
So if we look at the RWA space, over the last 2 years, the boom has not come, right? So we would all say probably it's been underperforming expectations. And the excuse largely has been regulatory uncertainty, clarity. So now if you look at the 4 major jurisdictions, United States, Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia, do you guys see changes because of some of these regulatory authorities are becoming more crypto, more clarity, and is that going to drive maybe the adoption of RWA in certain regions more quickly than others?
I don't think it's regulations that is changing the game this year, because now we see much more traction. It's true that we have more clarity on the regulation side. So large banks now, they know for years that security tokens are securities. But now it's written in the law, so now nobody can discuss this. So it's helping, but I don't think it was really the blocker. For me, the blocker is really about education. And yeah, maybe regulatory on the stablecoin part, the cash leg, yes, that's true. But it was mostly about education and how you can leverage public blockchains. Most financial institutions, they close their IT environment for decades. So if suddenly you arrive with a project and you say, hey, we're going to do this on this open infrastructure, everybody freak out and tell you, okay, later, after the other projects. But step by step, blockchain and even crypto are getting well-known and more credible. So I think now it's much easier for anyone working at a financial institution to talk about blockchain-based projects. A few years ago, you were the alien of the room. Now it's much easier. So step by step, we see real projects. I think that's a real key changer.
We can still take a few questions. I thought it was, but if someone has. Otherwise,
Thank you. Question here. On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate the understanding of the, let's say, governments, businesses, understanding of the, let's say, FHE space or in general on the privacy as a technology? How would you rate it? I know that it was like pretty 1, like 2 or 3 years ago. I'm curious at this moment, what's the level of the...
1.5.
1.5, okay.
No, so joke aside, governments are not there yet. We're engaging with them for several aspects, not just blockchain, and it's a conversation. What will help the conversation is that FHE is becoming an ISO standard next year. So you see, you can refer to something that governments know, which is standards. It's also getting certified, by NIST, by ANSI, by ENISA. So in a way, I can tell you what it is by pointing to intergovernment standard and by telling you these are agencies that looked at it and said it is safe. So that's for government. Enterprises, they don't care about what is the underlying technology. They have a problem, they want to solve it. And if it's ZK or FHE or MPC or something else, they'll go for it. So we do have very good discussions with large US banks because they're at the forefront of technology. It's a bit harder with, I would say, European banks just because they don't have the bandwidth to absorb all these new things. But we do still have discussions with them, and they are keen to explore, they're keen to engage, and they're keen to support us talk to the regulators as well.
Understood, thank you.
Hey, my question is in regards to the commercial aspects and the competitiveness of RWA compared to, say, existing ways of raising funds. At the moment, actually, let's hear what you have in terms of what do you think about that? How competitive it is right now compared to, say, conventional capital raising?
Yeah, to raise funds, if you tokenize, it will not help. The distribution rails with tokenized assets are still getting built. Actually, it's accelerating because now we have good assets to distribute. When BlackRock and others are coming with big assets, it's helping to build the rails and interoperability between players. But it's still much easier to distribute via banks than via blockchain today. However, there are things that are starting to be easier in a tokenized world, for example, collateralization. It's much easier now to have a tokenized asset and to collateralize it than going to your bank and explaining what is your asset, and then the banker will check his list. It's not in the list. It's not. You cannot collateralize it here. So it depends. But to raise funds, simply tokenizing an asset doesn't help.
Yeah, maybe to add to this. So if you have $100,000 worth of assets, and you want to get $30,000 of a loan against these assets, good luck. Today it's just not possible. And that's one of the reasons why investors need tokenization, and that's one of the reasons why investment managers believe that they need to get there to offer it to their clients. Now, on the flip side of it, who's going to give you the loan? It's a new asset class altogether, because instead of buying treasury bonds at today good yield, but in the future maybe at a much lower yield, you now have wealthy individuals, fully collateralized loans at maybe a good interest rate. So there is also a demand for funds to deploy their money into high quality, high yield assets, and that's a new asset class that hopefully will appear soon.
And to finish the debate, I'd like to open up a little bit with the relationship between RWA and Defi. So far, the innovation has been in Defi, and have moved to RWA. Now, with privacy, it's mostly coming from the regulatory pressure, and so things like FHE are, I would say, RWA innovations. Will they switch to Defi? Will there be private Uniswap on non-RWA tokens? Will there be any private AAV where I can put encrypted token on AAV? Will this be possible?
I guess so. At the end, confidentiality and privacy are what everyone expects. It's not just investors, traditional investors, it's everyone else. It's just a question of a trade-off. And as I mentioned, the throughput is not necessarily high enough for certain assets to easily migrate to FHE, but little by little. I like the HTTP versus HTTPS. Everyone was on HTTP. Eventually, everyone moved to HTTPS. It took 20 years for the journey, but hopefully it will be faster for these technologies. But now, no one believes that they can launch a website on HTTP. They all think confidentiality is important.
Some hackers do sometimes, but it's flagged by Google Chrome.
Exactly.
Luc, do you have an opinion on this?
I think very quickly we'll see more and more assets tokenized on public blockchain with maybe a transparent public version and one a bit more private. And we'll see some wrappers like this, and people will switch from one version to another. If we really need to make the DeFi protocols themselves private, I don't think so. I think if we make the transactions private, you don't need to encrypt the whole thing, and so we need to keep some interoperability. But for sure, the cash leg will be as private as possible, as soon as possible.
I see. Does someone has another questions in the public? Otherwise, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.